In this video, we will be talking about motion under gravity. So the first keyword we will be looking at is motion. When we say an object is in motion, it simply means that the object has changed position. So if I have a car, for instance, this car is known to have mass, and the unit of mass is always in kilogram or in gram. So imagine you've seen a car and that car changes position from point A down to point B. Then we simply say the car has undergone motion. But it is extremely important to take note that the car has mass and the car has to move with either a velocity or acceleration, in which case acceleration is just simply the change in velocity over time. So the change in velocity over time is what is termed as acceleration. I will explain this better in another video. So an object is known to have mass, it moves with a velocity, then it has undergone motion. Now the direction in which this object moves is extremely important as well. So we know an object can move vertically or the object can move horizontally. But in this video, we are covering the vertical movement of the object. So when an object is moving vertically downward, then we simply say the object is moving under gravity. So for instance, you have a house, very fine building, and there's a ball at the top of this house. The ball falls from the top of this house downward. Then we simply say the ball is falling under gravity, or the ball is falling freely under gravity. So when an object moves vertically downward, there are some key terminology for you to take note of. One, at the top of this building, the ball has what we call initial velocity, and this is given as 0. The reason why is you do not need to perform any magic to make the ball to fall. Instead, you're only preventing it from falling. So if you have anything currently with you there, just simply hold it some height above the ground, release it, and it will gladly fall to the ground. You don't need any prayer, it will happen automatically. You can only prevent it from falling if you release the hands, whatever you're holding, it will fall freely under gravity. So we simply say the velocity it is having above the ground is known to be 0, and it is called initial velocity, represented with the letter U. As it falls to the ground, it increases in speed. Gravity is given as 9.8 meter per second square, in some cases 10 meter per second square. So as the ball falls to the ground, it is increasing by 9.8, or should I say 10 meters per second square. So if the ball, for instance, has 0 in this case, it moves about a meter, it becomes 10, it moves another meter, it becomes 20, then it hits the ground, let's assume with 30 meters per second. So that is what it's going to use in hitting whatever here is on the floor. If this is a glass, if this is someone's head, whatever that would be. So as the ball falls to the ground, it increases in speed. The velocity at which it is used in hitting the ground is now termed as final velocity, which is given as v. So, first important note, when an object is moving vertically downward, it has an initial velocity of 0 and a final velocity is whatever the velocity it uses in hitting the floor, which could be any range of numbers. And gravity is known to be positive g because it is falling under gravity. Now, it is also important to take note that for an object to move, that object requires time. In fact, if I have the capacity to stop time, I will stop movement. So this object moving from point A in this case to point B is moving with time. So it moves from the height to the floor. Also, an object can move upward, but if the object is moving upward, a force is required or a velocity is required to make it move upward. What do I mean? So if there's a football, for instance, on the floor, this football cannot just automatically move upward. You need a velocity to make it go upward. This velocity is also called initial velocity. Try not to get confused. I'm still going to draw the line clearly to understand it better. If it is moving upward, it has initial velocity. So let's assume it is moving from the ground with 40 meters per second. It decreases in speed from 40, it becomes 30, it becomes 20, it becomes 10, and then it becomes 0. So at this point, the ball then falls back to the ground. So if you throw an object up, when you are throwing the object up, you are throwing that object with a velocity, but you might not know the velocity at which you are throwing that object up with. As it moves upward, it decreases in speed till it gets to a final velocity, which we call v. And at that final velocity, it is given as what? 0. And it is moving against gravity because we know gravity wants everything to come towards the earth. It pulls everything towards the earth. So if you're falling or if you're moving upward, you are going against gravity. So this will be given as negative g. So gravity will be represented as negative. So instead of you considering it as positive 10, you are considering it as negative 10. So it becomes 40, you take away 10, it becomes 30, it becomes 20, it becomes 10, and finally becomes 0. All these intervals you see here are also velocity. So at the maximum height, we call this the maximum height. This is the highest point the ball can get to before it falls back to the ground. So I can confidently say that when an object is under the influence of gravity, we have some key things to take notes. One, the object can either fall vertically to the ground, and in this case, we would consider u to be equal to 0, gravity to be positive, it can either be 10 meters per second square or 9.8 meters per second square, and we need a velocity it will use in hitting the floor. So this could be 0, it moves down, it becomes 10, 20, 30, and so on. But when it is moving upward, take note of the letter. This is u. This becomes the initial velocity, and this will be given. If this is not known, there is no way the ball will move upward. Wherever you're starting from becomes the initial. So it decreases. So gravity becomes negative g. It makes the ball, reduces the speed of the object. So it becomes 40, then it becomes 30, it becomes 20, it becomes 10, and finally becomes 0. And then we call this also the final what? Velocity. These two diagrams are things you should take note of, and you can solve most questions under motion, under gravity. So there are some equations you should take note of. Let me write that on a clean sheet. What are these equations? One, equations, it says V is equal to U. It could be positive or it could be negative, depending on the direction of the object. GT. It means the final velocity is equal to the initial velocity. It could be positive, it could be negative, gravity times time, or V square is equal to U square. It could be positive, negative, 2G and H, or it could be H is equal to UT, positive or negative, half GT square. Now, what does the VS stand for? The VS stands for the final velocity, which is in meter per second. The US stands for the initial velocity. The T stands for time. H stands for height. And time is in seconds. Height is in meter. And also you have our gravity, which is in acceleration due to gravity. And this is either 10 meter per second square or 9.8 meter per second square, depending on the use case. So let's look at one example. So if I'm to look at this question, for instance, it says a ball is released from a height above the ground. Find the velocity after 5 seconds. Mostly, I always advise for you to simply always draw the line, not to get confused. So a ball is released from a height above the ground. So I will simply say this is the ball, this is the height, which is unknown to me yet. I call this H. So if the ball is falling from a height above the ground, I will take this as positive G. And what should be my initial velocity? The initial, because it is moving from, this is the starting point, my initial velocity will be 0, and the ball will need to hit the ground with a velocity which we do not know. The ball needs to move with time. So all these variables, I will try to test it with the equations of motion and see which would work. So a ball is released from a height above the ground. Find the velocity after 5 seconds. So time was even given to me, which is 5 seconds. Take g to be 10 meters per second. We know the value of g. So if I should say v is equal to u, should I take it as a positive or a negative? Since it is falling downwards, I will take it as a positive, then gt. So the question says find velocity. So I'm looking for the final velocity, but I know it has to be the velocity coming downwards. So I would say v is equal to, what is your initial velocity? 0 plus what is gravity? Gravity is 10. And what is the time? It is 5. So I know the velocity would be 50 meters per second after 5 seconds. If you should look at another example, which says a basketball is thrown vertically upward. So I represent it this way. It is thrown vertically upward. I know it is going against gravity. This is g, so the ball will be reducing in speed. So what velocity was it used to? Did they use in throwing it upward? So a basketball is thrown vertically upward with an initial velocity of 40 meters per second. So I would simply say this is 40 meters per second. I know it will keep on reducing till it gets to the final velocity, which will be 0. Find the velocity after 3 seconds. So they give us a time they call 3 seconds. Now please take note. This time here did not say it is the final velocity, because at final velocity there's nothing to solve here. I will just simply say 0. So it says after 3 seconds. Okay? So I would say v is equal to u negative gt. What is my v in this case? I am looking for it because they did not say the final. How would you know it is the final? If I should ask you at the maximum height, always take note of this word, maximum height. At the highest point, that is when v becomes 0. So the v is what I'm looking for. What is the u? The u in this case would be 40 because it's moving from the floor. My g would be 10 and the time will be 3. So this would be 40 minus 30. It becomes 10 meters per second. So it is not yet 0. So it is 40, 30, 20, 10, and it took 3 seconds to get to this point. The next question now says the maximum height. At the maximum height, that is when v is permitted to be 0. Before the maximum height, v can't be 0. V can be 10, v can be 20, v can be any value. So at the maximum height, v would be 0. So the maximum height and the time taken to reach the maximum height. Okay, this first equation would not work. Remember, I gave you 3 equations. V is equal to u positive or negative gt. V square is equal to u square positive or negative 2gh, or h is equal to ut positive or negative half gt square. So which should I use in this case? This second equation has height. I think I can use this because the values here are given. I know the value of v at maximum height. At maximum height, v should be 0. So I would say v square is equal to u square negative 2gh. What is v? V is 0 square. What is u? U is 40 square. 2 times 10 times, we are looking for the h. Okay, let me try to make it a little bit clearer. So this now becomes 0 square is equal to 40 square minus, just repeating what is here, minus 10 times h, it becomes 0 square is 1600. You can punch this on your calculator, times 20h. If you take the negative 20h to the other side of the equation, it becomes 20h is equal to 1600 divided by 20 divided by 20, and this gives you h should be 80 meter, meaning as the ball moves upward with an initial velocity of 40, the height it gets to is 80 meter before the final velocity becomes 0. The next question now says the time taken to reach this height. I can use the first, which is v is equal to u negative g t. I'm looking for time. What is the v? The v is 0 at the maximum height. What is u? 40. Negative gravity is what? Gravity is 10t. This becomes 10t is equal to 40. I put the negative 10 to the other side, divided by 10, divided by 10, and this gives you t is equal to 4 seconds. Okay, and then we are done with these questions. So what is the summary to take away from this? Is whenever an object is moving downward, vertically downward, the initial velocity should be taken as 0, gravity should be positive, and it hits the ground with a velocity. And if the object is moving vertically upward, gravity should be taken as g. It needs to get to what we call max height before v becomes 0 and it returns back to the ground. And u in this case will be given for it to move upward. You can also be asked a question, just a bonus, where they might ask you the time of flight, meaning if it takes 4 seconds to get to the highest point, if air resistance is neglected, it's also going to take another 4 seconds. So it's going to take 8 seconds to move upward and another 4, pardon me, it will take 4 seconds to move up and another 4 seconds to come down, giving you a total of 8 seconds. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.